Hey everybody, it's Julie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing 5 different ways to use smallish stamps. It's always a challenge, right, when we're used to doing A2 size cards. But I found that the number one hack for resolving the issue of small stamps is to simply scale down the card. Go with a 4-bar note card, which is 3.5 by 5 inches. So I made a bunch of these all ready to go, and I'm just going to share 5 different ways to use these smaller size stamps from the Love Note stamp set. So I've got the rainbow here mounted to an acrylic block, and the reason for that is I want to be able to move fast. And I've got my 4-bar note card closed shut with a piece of washi tape so it doesn't pop up on me. And then I just use some tape runner to temporarily anchor it inside my MISTI platform. And the reason for that is I just wanted to be able to stamp and not get ink on my work surface when I stamped off the edge. So it's keeping everything clean. Now I started out with a soft pink, and then I graduated to that one image you see right there in the lower half of the card. I've kind of visually divided this card into thirds, and I'm very strategically placing the different colors that I'm working with, kind of a boho rainbow effect. And I'll have the colors listed in the supplies down below so you know exactly what I'm using. But you can play around with different combinations, but I find this works really well with this particular image. And I'm not having to color it in. I'm just using the ink pad colors to add the color to my card. And once I've got these images very strategically placed, I can go ahead and add a sentiment. And I'll probably pop it up just because it gives a little bit of dimension to an otherwise very flat card. But this is very clean and very simple and very effective. So it doesn't matter that the image is the same size. The fact that you use these different colors that work well together, you can repeat stamp it, but in a random fashion to create this really fun modern look. Now for the second method, I'm going to take this little flower. This is the Buttercup from the set, and I've got it on an acrylic block that has a grid, and I'm going to do a 9 patch. But the difference with this is I'm using a colored ink. This is the Distress Oxide in Spice Marmalade, I think that's what it's called. And I'm stamping onto pink cardstock, and because the Distress Oxide ink is kind of a hybrid ink, it's going to give me a rich saturation and coverage there onto that colored cardstock, and it's going to pop off there because it does have that opacity to it. And I used the grid on the block to just line everything up. I started in the center with my middle row of images, and then I could stamp the other images around it. Now I was a little bit off center. It's okay. I just went over to my paper trimmer and trimmed it down just a little bit so that you'd never know that I was off. And that was a really simple and easy card. Now I've got the diamond image from the same set, and I'm actually going to mount it to an acrylic block with the image against the block and the flat side outward. And I'm going to ink that up. And again, I'm working with a nice soft pink, and it's going to give me a nice solid image. And the great thing about doing this is it works well with symmetrical images. They don't have to be perfectly symmetrical, but the more symmetrical they are, the easier it is to flip to the back side and use that to create your solid coloring, and then come back in by flipping the stamp over. Just clean it off, flip it over, and stamp the detail image right over the top. Then I die cut those all out, and I set them aside in a bowl. I've got a 4-bar note card plus a 4-bar panel, and then I went ahead and made a 4-bar shaker frame. And I've got the acetate already in place there, and everything is designed to be built together, and they, the dimensions are pretty much the same. Now this piece here, that's the 4-bar panel, it's going to be slightly smaller than my shaker window, which is the same size as my base card, but by having this just slightly smaller, I shaved a little bit off it. I don't have to worry about having it lined up perfectly. Now I've added my stamped and die cut images because they really make great shaker card filler. And I threw those down. I made sure they were face up. And then I'm going to take my panel that has the one remaining diamond and the sentiment already mounted to it. And I did use those pop-up foam adhesive thingies. And then I can go ahead and mount this to my shaker window. And there you can see how fun it is to have those images actually serve as the shaker guts inside this card. So now I'm going to get this mounted. I just used tape runner after I sealed the whole thing shut. and it was easy to mount to my base card. This is one of the fastest shaker cards I've ever made. It just came together super fast. Now, I did use the standard layout of a focal image with a sentiment underneath it, but you don't always have to do it that way. Now, I really like to take these images and stamp them onto watercolor paper. I'm going to prep the surface here with some anti-static pouch and then pop that into the Misty again. And I'm going to ink up with some VersaFine Clair. This is a nice pigment ink that will dry pretty fast, but I love that it's a nice saturated black, and I want to heat emboss it with clear powder because I find that if I do like heat embossing something in black, I just prefer using a black pigment ink with a clear powder over the top because then I don't get stray grains of black embossing powder where I don't want them. This gives me the cleanest black embossing I can get. So now I'm just going to watercolor these images in, and you can do this any way you want. Some people like to color with Copic markers. Some people will use water-based markers. I'm using those clean color real brush markers, and I just either apply a little bit of the color directly to the stamped image, or I'll put some on an acrylic block and dilute it down and pick it up with my water brush, and I'm going to blend those colors out. This is just a very quick and easy way for me to color things, and I will often color the whole sheet and have it all ready to go, and then I can die cut those things out. Now, another way to use these small images, instead of, image in the middle, sentiment underneath, is to tile them. And I decided to use the hexagon, the nested hexagon dies here, so that I could create kind of a honeycomb effect in the same color. So I just grabbed scraps of paper that I had, and I cut out a variety of sizes that worked well with the scale of the images that are going to get popped on there. And then one of them is mounted flat, but the others are popped up with those thin foam mounting squares. And then as I was building my layout here, I realized I needed to have room for the sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that into the Misty, get my sentiment stamped right flat onto the card, and then that very last hexagon, I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go. And then I realized at the end there was the spot that made everything visually balanced, and I went ahead and popped that up. But you'll notice that when you stagger the layers, it really brings those small focal images to life. And for another idea, I took a piece of 3 by 5 inches black cardstock, so it's got a 1/2 inch smaller width than the base card, which is a 4-bar card. All these cards are 4-bar note cards. And then I'm going to take the salt and pepper die and run that through, but I cut off on the edge. And then I'm going to use some tape runner to mount that temporarily to the base card. And this is going to allow me to pop the whole thing into the Misty. I'm going to take that off so it doesn't hinder me when I'm coloring, but I'm going to put that right there so I can position those stamps where I want them to go. I'm going to go ahead and get that mounted in place. Again, I'm going to ink up with the VersaFine Onyx, or what is it? Nocturne. It's Nocturne, not Onyx. And then once I got those stamped, I decided I wanted to add a sentiment, and because it's a long, skinny one, I flipped it around upside down. I wanted to have it running along the edge there. This is just a fun and different way to use the sentiments that come with the set. So it's going to draw the eye downward towards where the salt and pepper shaker are. Now, I popped that black panel off because for some reason, for me, it's just easier to see what I'm doing and get it out of the way. And I'm just going to use colored pencils. Now, if you've made sure that this ink is completely dry, you can come in with water-based markers. I do not like using Copic markers to color in images I've stamped with the VersaFine. For some reason, they don't play nicely. So I just will come in here with water-based markers, or in this case, the colored pencils, and I'm adding just a lighter tone of gray to my pepper, and then I'll come in with some black to add some additional shading. And I am not a colorist. I usually do whatever is the quickest and easiest for me. Most of the time that's watercolor, but on this I stamped onto Neenah Solar White, and I did not want to have the colors of the Copic markers bleeding through. I had already used VersaFine, so I decided the only coloring medium that was going to work for me in this instance was going to be just to grab my colored pencils and make quick work of it. Now you notice with the salt, I outlined her in a pale blue, and then I added some pink and rosy cheeks. And for some reason, pale blue, I know there's a theory to it, but it makes white images appear even whiter. So that's why I often outline my images that are supposed to be white with a pale blue. Now I'm going to pop up that black panel. So I added foam tape all the way around, and I just peel back the corners there because it really helps not to have everything exposed when you're trying to mount this and get it on straight. I'm finding that this really helps to remove the liner tape only partially, and then you'll have room to fudge around and futz with it to get it into position. Now I'm going to add a little bit more detail by taking a white gel pen and adding my little salt that's sprinkling down, and then a little bit of diamond stickles to highlight their cheeks. And this is a very simple card, but visually, even though that image is very small, this draws the eye right into these little salt and pepper shakers. They're so cute. And there you have 5 different ways to use the really fun small images in the set called Love Notes. I hope this inspires you, and thanks for watching.